Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Parishscope. This is the podcast for St. John's Lutheran Church, Sam Prairie. I'm Pastor Chris Sansom.
And I'm Casey Doremus. I'm the creative worship director at Our Savior Lutheran in Washington.
Yeah. So let's get to talking.
Okay.
We're gonna dive right in, because I'll be honest with you. So this was, we had kind of the special thing last week where we talked about like hymnody and stuff like that. But this week, one of the things I kind of wanted to talk about is, and actually I wanted to kind of talk about it a little bit last week, but again, we had something bigger. We had something more important.
Right.
We had hymnals.
Yes.
But we need to talk about what's going on campuses, on like college campuses.
Sure.
This is getting crazy. This is getting absolutely insane. Have you been keeping up with this at all?
I'm not sure specifically which you're talking about. There's things I know that have been happening, but I don't know if we're thinking of the same.
So I'm thinking about the protest.
Okay.
So we have, and I think I was reading or I listened to the news or something, and somebody said it was happening on over 60 college campuses across the United States.
Wow.
And they're having protest in support of Palestine.
Oh, right. Yes.
They are pro-Palestine, protest. And some of this is getting just absolutely crazy. And I felt like, that's why one of the reasons I needed to talk about it.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know how much of this have you kept up with?
Well, yeah, I haven't. I know that this stuff has been going on because there's people on social media that have been posting a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
People saying like down with Israel and all this stuff. And it's kind of crazy to me that people are saying stuff like that, because I don't think they have any comprehension of what they're actually saying. They're taking one side of the story and they're just going, well, those people are suppressed and look at all these horrible things that have happened to them. So I think the other side should just all be dead.
Yeah.
And it's like, and then I don't know. And as I would say a enthusiast history buff, it's like there's some people in history who wanted to kill those people as well. Yeah.
Believe it or not, there is some history with that. Yeah.
Yeah. There's a few. Yeah. I don't know if anybody has heard of Adolf Hitler, but he was pretty into that idea too.
Now, who is this? Wait, I don't know if I've ever heard of him.
He was this guy who, he started the Nazi Party.
Nazi, huh?
Yeah. And they took,
crazy.
There's something called World War II that he actually, started. And as I have to say this, in the great words of Norm Macdonald.
I was just about to say this.
Yeah.
And
who did they start a war with?
The world.
and you think that would last 2 minutes, but it was actually close. I love his. It's so true, though.
I was just about to say that. The fact that you beat me to the punch is great. Oh, my goodness gracious. Well, I think, kind of to your first point, right, people are only reading one side of the story and all that kind of stuff. So let's actually add this into some context.
Okay.
And I can't remember. I think we've maybe, talked about this a little bit here and there, just because, again, I like to, one of the goals of this podcast was always to take current event things and kind of delve into some of the theology that stands behind them. And so we did kind of talk about it a little bit here and there, but never in great detail. And now that the protests are coming out, it's like, well, we really need to break this down a little bit. Mm-hmm. So all of this started on October 7th. Now, when I say all of this started, I do not mean the split between Israel and Palestine. That's been at least since 1948. So,
right, yeah.
In 48, they were established as a country. The land technically belonged to Britain at the time. There were people living there. Those people were kind of pushed a little bit off to the side. Those were the Palestinians. And, and then there was kind of like this mishap in the 60s, became known as the 6-Day War. Israel took over the land of Jerusalem, but then they stopped. They still let the Palestinians live there. It's not like they demolished them or took them all out or anything like that. They just got as far as they wanted, which was to Jerusalem, really. And so that's kind of where, and again, there's been little thises and that's all over the place. And Palestinians most certainly did not like, Jews, Israelis, people. A lot of times whenever you get to these border areas, they'll lob missiles over. The Iron Dome was established by Israel to combat this. The Iron Dome will actually shoot missiles out of the sky. It's crazy.
Oh, wow.
It is a wild piece of defense, kind of military defense. But on October 7th, there was kind of this surprise attack.
Yes.
That was done by the Palestinians in Gaza. The Palestinians in Gaza are almost completely controlled, if not completely controlled, by a terrorist group known as Hamas.
Mm-hmm.
They had people like, basically parachuting in. They had people coming from underground. They had stuff coming from all over the place. They had it going on right during the middle of a music festival. They brutalized people that they caught kind of off guard, murdering all kinds of people, just whoever they can get their hands on. And they drug off some hostages.
Yeah.
This is what sparked the war. Now, the Palestinians, in this regard, especially those in the Gaza Strip, this was well coordinated. A lot of people believe, and I happen to be one of them, that it was very much funded by Iran and other terrorist cells and other terrorist groups. So it was a very coordinated attack. However, again, just like anything, the Palestinians really don't have the military might for a full-on encounter with Israel.
Right.
And so one of the things that they've done, the second Israel decided to attack, is they started basically they'll put their army bases underneath hospitals or schools. They'll utilize kids and women as like shields and stuff like that. And so a lot of times what happens is like Israel's going after Hamas. Well, all of a sudden people get caught in the crossfires.
Yeah.
Because that's kind of the way Hamas does things.
And they set them up as shields for themselves. So
Yeah. And so it's I guess I wouldn't say it's impossible, but it's almost impossible to not, get some of the others.
Right.
This thing has been raging on obviously since October. It's nasty, it's brutal, it's war. War sucks, right?
Terrible.
war is a terrible thing. However, now all of a sudden we have these protests that are erupting all over college campuses. I've seen them in the streets and stuff like that, and they're very, very much pro-Palestine, and it kind of leads a lot of questions like, what's really going on? Now, I know obviously, sometimes you see a news story like, an innocent family got killed, and there has definitely been, I hate to say it, but like there has definitely been some of that, like Israel has most certainly, mistaken targets. On a couple occasions.
Of course, yeah.
And with that, there have been some casualties. And when there's a casualty, they need to find some way to apologize for that. But at the same time, again, it's war.
Yeah.
Casualties happen in war. That it's a terrible thing. But what I find really fascinating, and this is really, really fascinating, is it seems like our world right now, especially the youth of our world, and I could be mistaken. In fact, I know it's not just the youth, but I think there's a lot of youth that would fit into this.
Yeah.
They seem to push everything into either an oppressor or an oppressed, category.
Yeah, it's a victim mentality.
Yeah. So either you're the person who's doing the oppressing, or you are the one who is being oppressed. And if you are being oppressed, then we need to fight for your freedom, kind of thing. Fight. And so whenever they look at the Palestinian story, they see somebody who's been pushed to the sidelines, and they go, "Oh, this person or these people have been oppressed," and so they want to be on the side of the oppressed. They want to be on that person's side. And what I have seen so far, and again, I have not sat down and talked to these guys. Like, it's not like some pro-Palestine or pro-Palestinian apologist has come up and talked to me. Like I'm just going by what I see on the news.
Mm-hmm.
When you go to like the MSNBC, CBS, it seems like they're just saying, hey, there's crazy stuff going on the campus. When you go to Fox News, you get more of the Palestinian, pro-Palestine stuff like that. And then to the point that you were kind of talking about to begin with, like a lot of these people, they are not in favor of, say, a two-state solution. Now, two-state solution is the solution that has been proposed multiple times to the Palestinians. The idea being is they get to keep their land, and that's just their land. That's their country.
Right.
That's the Palestinian nation, if you will. But then Israel gets to be its own nation, and because right now, like even like electric and stuff is still the Israelis actually give the Palestinians that.
Yeah.
So the Palestinians are technically on Israeli land, so to speak.
Yeah.
And so that's what kind of causes this to be a big of a mess. However, the Palestinians have rejected that. Mm-hmm. And usually the chant goes from the river to the sea, and they're talking about the Jordan River to the Mediterranean Sea. So basically extermination of all the Jews that are happening to be in Israel.
Yeah.
Now, the other factor of that is like, so you're seeing a lot of blockades and stuff on some of these college campuses. And yeah, it is getting scary. Like they're blocking Jewish students.
Yeah, that's crazy to me. Which I don't know if they know this, but Jewish people have actually been, repressed before. Actually,
yeah,
not just in World War II, but actually there's been many times in history where Jewish people have been discriminated against. So it's amazing that they're sitting there, and especially some of these people. I mean, stereotypically are the people who talk about equality for like all sexes and people of transgender and all these things. And then they're sitting there going, well, you're a Jew, so you can't come onto this campus. It's mind blowing to me. Absolutely mind blowing that they're sitting there going, that Adolf Hitler guy had a point. Like, it's amazing to me that they actually are. But of course, if you said that to them, they'd go, well, we don't know. I'm not saying that.
Did you, there was news, this was months ago. somebody took a letter that Adolf Hitler wrote.
Oh my gosh.
And ripped his name off.
And
posted it online, and people were actually agreeing with it.
Of course, yeah.
Thinking it was like really good stuff.
Yeah.
Like, this guy's really got a point.
Well, yeah, I know. Now I know this is a side thing, but did I tell you about the actor? I'm sorry, this is a Power Ranger guy, but there's an actor who brought up that he was going to make this clothing line. This is from a podcast. This blew up the fandom, by the way. That he said he was going to have quotes from leaders of history, bad and like the evil and the good.
Yeah.
And people just freaked out because they're like, there's nothing. Adolf Hitler has never said anything that should ever be repeated. It's like, actually, if you want to know how corrupt certain people are, just read what Adolf Hitler said, because you can see word for word what he's telling people to do. And then, like, when they talk about, let's say, gun control, Adolf Hitler's stance on gun control was, take the guns away from all the citizens, then you can control them.
Yes.
So when people say, well, you shouldn't have guns, it's like, okay, well, Adolf Hitler agrees with you, because then you can control people. Yeah. And so it's funny because these people are saying, oh, I can't believe that guy would ever say he had anything positive to say. It's like, he didn't say it was positive and like he was a great guy. He was saying there are things that he said that are like, you should know. And so when these people just start protesting, they don't realize they're basically just doing the same chants as Adolf Hitler. It's incredible. It's just mind blowing to me.
Yeah.
But they don't care, because they just want to.
Now I will say though, this is one of the things, like, this is why I think we need to be careful.
Yeah.
Because some of it, yes, there are some people that are so hoodwinked that's what they're doing. There are other people that are a little bit more nuanced, and they're not anti-Jew, for instance. Mm-hmm. They're anti-war and how this war is taking place with Palestine. They just want a ceasefire. Right. Now, again, should there be a ceasefire? Again, I've said this on this podcast more than once. Like, I tend to lean to the right. And so I believe that Israel has a right both to defend itself as well as demand certain things from a nation that continues to attack it. Mm-hmm. Or I guess should say a people that continues to attack it. So quite frankly, until Hamas basically says we give, there should not be a ceasefire.
Yeah.
And Hamas, in order to say we give, needs to basically give the hostages back, which from what I understand, they don't even know where they are anymore, which means they're probably dead, unfortunately.
Yeah.
But they need to do something to basically cry uncle, and they just haven't done it yet.
Mm-hmm.
And having a bunch of people around college campuses saying no, we demand ceasefire, I do not think that's the right move. But that is my politics coming into this,
right?
So again, and we're talking about this, and obviously we're talking about the mental capacity. We need to kind of bring in the theology with all this, right? Because I mean,
right.
Again, the podcast isn't to talk about politics,
Yeah.
as much as it is fascinating,
Sure.
and can be very, very fascinating. We do need to talk a little bit about the theology. I almost said politics. Yeah, we do need to talk about politics. No, we need to talk about theology. And the first thing is that one of the things that I've noticed is that like people again are kind of going into this Zionist, language, and again, politics aside, Zionism is this idea that we need to like reestablish the nation of Israel, because that's what the Bible says, and I've kind of talked like this before. Like, look, if God wants to reestablish the nation of Israel, God's just going to do it.
Mm-hmm.
He doesn't need our help, and so my political nuance in that regard is not me going, boy, I want to help God out. Now, do I want to do the right thing? Yes, I want to do the right thing.
Mm-hmm.
But that is different than saying, well, I'm going to do this to hopefully usher in the end of the world. Like that's, those are two different things. And so I'm not a Zionist. I do think that Israel, from a moral standpoint, is in the right at this point in time. And again, I understand that that's going to cause some disagreements with people that maybe are kind of a little on the fence, and maybe they heard of some of the atrocities of war, and they're like, well, I don't know how I feel about that. And again, I get it. War sucks, and there's no doubt that Israel is, well, when they go to war, Israel tends to be a rather brutal nation.
Mm-hmm.
So again, I'm not gonna sit around and try to defend that.
Right.
But at the same time, from a theological perspective, I'm not a Zionist. I don't believe, that I need to somehow establish Israel to kind of usher that in. But that being said, I'm also against the discrimination against Jews.
Yeah.
In any capacity. Now, a lot of times people will bring up a tract that Luther wrote.
Okay.
Luther wrote a tract more towards the end of his life, and it was kind of bitter towards the Jews. I'm not going to lie. It was pretty bitter, pretty strong language. So strong was it that Hitler himself actually used this tract.
Wow.
It's pretty strong. Now, a little bit of context is in order because it's actually important, because a lot of people will bring this tract out after over a time and say, look how awful Luther was. Like, okay, let's add some context.
Yeah.
You said you were a history buff.
Yeah.
You said you liked the fact that you knew that the Jews had been persecuted before. They had, absolutely. One of the examples of when they were actually persecuted happened all the way back in 1348 and 49. In 1348, something happened in Europe. Do you know what it was? Question.
1348.
Yeah.
Columbus sailed the ocean blue. No, I'm kidding. I don't know. I'm sorry.
It's the Black Death.
Oh, the Black Death. Okay, yes.
Yeah. The plague, the bubonic plague.
Yeah.
It started creeping around Europe and started just going nuts. And by the way, COVID is not the bubonic plague.
But they lied to us, Chris. No, I'm just kidding.
But one of the things is, and this is always a really interesting little tidbit of history, I find it fascinating, I really, really do, is people of Jewish faith firmly believed that about once a year, right before the Passover, that they needed to clean their house.
Yeah.
And they would do this because they didn't want any leftover yeast in the house.
Mm-hmm.
So right before Passover, they were getting rid of the yeast, the bad yeast, the wild yeast, any kind of yeast.
Yeah.
So that way that their bread wouldn't even accidentally leaven. Like, right? Like you got to have unleavened bread.
Yeah.
So they would clean their house, and like they would be meticulous about it.
Yes.
It was like hyper clean. Well, as you might guess, they didn't have a problem with, like, say, black rats then.
Right.
And if they didn't have a problem with black rats, then they didn't have a problem with the fleas that a lot of times were on black rats.
Yeah.
And if they didn't have a problem with the fleas on the black rats, then they very oftentimes did not catch the plague.
Yes.
Well, one theory as to the origins of the plague in those times was that somebody was poisoning the water. And as you might guess, if you're poisoning the water, you don't poison yourself. That would be silly.
Yes.
And so here you have all these people dying, like terrible death, over 50% in a lot of cases. Some cases, entire towns were just obliterated. And yet you have this community over here who seems, every now and again somebody gets it, but like by and large, they're doing pretty good.
Yeah. Well, it's crazy because I've actually heard someone talk about this before about how, but even back then you had people who were like crazy cat ladies. That's no offense to anybody, by the way, but they call the stereotypical, like they got, 15 cats or something and they live alone or whatever. And they said that what do cats eat? They eat all the rats and they get rid of the rats. So those ladies never caught anything.
Yeah.
And then people thought they were witches.
Yeah.
Because, this lady, she hasn't caught it and everybody around her died. And it was just because, she didn't have any rats.
Yeah.
So it's interesting, how those things, I don't know, like now you really think about how smart society is and how we've learned so much that back then they just thought, these Jewish people aren't dying, so they must be must be trying to kill everybody. They don't think about, they clean their house all the time.
Yeah, exactly. But I think what happened is a lot of people then, like the witches and like the Jews in that case, a lot of people thought that they were the culprits and they got this vile reputation. Their reputation wasn't great already. They were already kind of outcast.
Right.
But then it was like almost like, get them away from me. Like we don't want these people around us. Again, they're poisoning our water. Why would we want that around us? Why would we want somebody who's killing us to be around us? And so they started like chasing them out of their communities. And this was like perpetual, like all over Europe. Mm-hmm. And it went on for hundreds of years.
Right.
And so a lot of times if you had like a Jewish community around you in kind of medieval Europe, if you will, or like, I guess, borderline Renaissance era Europe, a lot of times you looked down on them, you disdained them, you hated them, you wanted them gone. And that was the mindset for like everybody. And Luther in his early years actually, said we need to reach out. These are our brothers. They just need to accept Jesus. Like they need to have the gospel proclaimed to them. And so he actually kind of condemned people for not even trying.
Yeah.
Well, after a lifetime of trying and trying and trying, and they kind of snubbed their nose at Luther a little bit, finally Luther gets frustrated. And in his frustration, Luther was a little fiery with the pen, we'll just say it that way, he writes down this tract. And in the tract, really at the time, the tract wasn't all that significant because he basically just said what everybody else said.
Yeah.
He sounded very common, and it was like stomp down their houses, burn them down, like kick them out, get rid of them. And that's the way everybody thought at that time period. Mm-hmm. And so the tract really wasn't all that meaningful. But, go 500 years or 400 years, and, you get one Adolf Hitler who reads this and goes, yeah, Luther's German, I'm German. Luther had the right idea. Let's get rid of him. And then all of a sudden now you have people pulling this track up, go, see how awful Luther was? He was a racist. He was this. And it's like, well, we disagree with this track. For sure we disagree. I mean, look, the LCMS, the Lutheran Church Missouri Synod, we are Lutheran because we subscribe to the Book of Concord, not because we're like everything Luther said was absolutely 100% correct. No, absolutely not. There are times and places when we actually disagree with Luther. This tract is one of them. So we disagree with this tract. We try our best to understand it historically, and we try to understand what was going on and why Luther may have said the things that he said, because they are pretty horrible.
Yeah.
But at the same time, like at the end of the day, we go, we disagree with him. He was wrong. He was wrong. And believe it or not, Luther's not like a canonized part of Scripture. He can be wrong.
Yeah.
We don't disagree with that. However, when we get to the Book of Concord, which is our book of confessional statements, and some of it, and a lot of it was actually written by Luther, but not all of it.
Yeah.
Some of it was written by Martin Kimnitz. Some of it was written by Philip Melanchthon. So, we got other parts of it. So it's not like it's just Luther, but it is a Lutheran theology.
Yeah. Interesting.
So, so this is kind of, again, kind of some of that history of the persecution that they faced. And as Lutherans, we do not subscribe to any form of real hate in any capacity.
Yeah. That's something, I don't know. I see that so often on like YouTube and different things where there's people yelling at, like protesting against some speaker or something. And a lot of times they're saying, oh, Christians you guys are also awful and judgmental and spread hate. And it's like, well, if you're listening to a Christian spreading hate, they're not reading the Bible right. And they're not not doing they're obviously not researching and doing the right thing, because that's not what the Bible says. So
yeah, no, not at all. Not at all. But yeah, I mean, again, it's kind of interesting to watch, and it'll be interesting to kind of see how this plays out. A lot of people are very fired up. A lot of people, a lot of opinions over a lot of things. Again, I don't think any of us have any issue with peaceful protest. I think the fear that I have is that you'll see more and more of these blockades where they're not letting Jewish students in. I think that's completely wrong and off base.
Yeah, that's not right.
They're taking over sections of the college campus and like demanding things and stuff. I think that's weird. Like, you're either a freedom fighter or you're not. And if you're a freedom fighter, you're sacrificing for what you feel is a good cause. Key word there is sacrifice.
Oh no, they don't want to sacrifice anything. They just want to yell and get their statement out. And then
I will say some of this stuff is almost comical. You know what I mean?
Sure.
Like did you see did you read about the bananas?
No, what's that?
Well, one of the pro-Palestinian protesters was allergic to bananas, which, by the way, is an allergy I've never actually heard of. But they were allergic to bananas, and so they put signs all over their tent. And so some of the, I guess, non-protesters, but I think most people are saying it was like, basically Jewish kids on campus, took a bunch of bananas and threw them at.
Oh, jeez.
Threw them. Yeah, like we're fighting war with bananas on college campus.
That is kind of funny.
Yeah.
Throw bananas at a protester.
Yeah. And then one kid I know on the Columbia campus claimed that there were chemical weapons used, and it turns out the chemical weapon was basically fart spray.
Oh yeah. I just can't imagine. I don't know. It's so mind blowing to me, especially in a country where it's all supposed to be about like it's a melting pot. That's what people have always said. It's like we accept people of all nationalities and things to come to the country legally, and they to stand there on a campus and say a Jewish student can't come to this school is mind-blowing to me.
Yeah, it is. It's mind-boggling.
It's just, I can't even imagine doing that, and I can't imagine, I don't know. It's just crazy. I can't even fathom how they think that's okay to do and right in any way, but I don't know. That's just, it's crazy.
I think one of the things that really, blows my mind, and it really does, it blows my mind. Like I remember, even in seminary, we had to read books, a lot of books, obviously theology and everything else and yada, yada, yada. But a lot of them were like over like real world events that took place. And, especially when you're reading stuff about the 20s and the 30s and some of the mindsets that were going on back then, you kind of talk to yourself and you go, that's crazy. There's no way we would think like that today. And then to see some of those thought processes come back, and the whole time you're thinking like, thank goodness we're past that age. These guys were nuts.
Yeah.
But then as you read on, you go, oh my gosh, we're kind of going back.
Yeah.
To a similar thought pattern, and again, I mean, that's one of the wild things I think as I see on campus and look at some of these protests and what some of these people are saying. And again, I realize like, anytime you see like, some news commentator, or talk show host or whatever it is says, look at this going on campus. It's the small minority, a lot of times they're like, look at this extreme thing. And like, that's the most extreme thing they could find. So I realize that's a small minority, but at the same time, it's like, and I'll be honest, I was talking with my kids the other day about some of this.
Yeah.
Because they were talking about it, and they'd actually talked about it in a guided discussion at school. at Good Shepherd. And I
Good
thought
Shepherd.
exactly at Good Shepherd. It was awesome. I was really, I can't tell you how ecstatic I was as a parent and as an adult.
Yeah.
To be able to kind of have that conversation with the kids over something that was so very timely, and to know that they had a good teacher that kind of helped kind of walk them and guide them through all
Right.
that.
Yeah.
But we talked about some of those things and some of those mindsets and some of the things that are being said on campus and these campuses. And it's just like, man, when I read the books back in the day, I was like, that's crazy. Because when I was a kid, that's not the way it was.
Right.
Like, again, I was born in 1981. Was really a teenager in high school in the 90s. Like, look, the 90s had all kinds of issues. Nobody's trying to say that they were perfect, but
Pogs. I mean,
yeah, right. Pogs.
Yeah.
But like let's be honest here. Like, again, like racism was still around, but like racism was looked at like, oh, you're a racist. Go dig a hole and go, just go
Yeah.
go climb in it. Like, don't be a racist. And like, racism was seen as this really big no-no. Like, you just, you can talk about race, you can talk about that kind of stuff, but if a person was right next to you and they were an African American, they're still a person, and that's that.
Yeah.
Like, and they're still a human being, and you're a human being, and we're all going to be good. And so, I felt like people that were blatantly racist were almost shunned from a societal standpoint. And yet here we are, like really 30 years later, and I'm just looking around going, some of these people are racist. I mean, they are legit racist.
Yeah.
And it boggles my mind that, again, when I was a kid, it was always like, oh yeah, like the really old people, some of them are racist.
Right.
And that's nothing against anybody that's old, but I'm just saying, people that were around prior to like even the civil rights movement and had been raised in an environment where racism was accepted and promoted, like, okay, so maybe you might meet somebody that has some of those ideas, but even them, they would never want to say something in public.
Yeah.
They would say, hey, I used to think like this, or, yada, yada, yada. But it was like they never really would just say, oh, yeah, I'm better than that other human being. Like, like again, and I just didn't see it. We didn't, but yet now it's everywhere.
Yeah. Oh, I mean, it's so crazy. I'm amazed at how openly people are just talking about how Israel should just all be killed. Like,
oh, yeah.
It's unbelievable to me, because that's just, like, I mean, you say racism was still around in the 90s. I was born in 91. So, early 2000s, we solved racism. But now it's back. So, no, I'm just kidding.
It came back.
It came back. It's, I don't know. It's mind blowing to me that the people think, I just can't even imagine, I just can't even imagine saying those things and saying that it's okay. There was a video that popped up that Saturday Night Live did this sketch. This was like 10 plus years ago. Mm-hmm. And it's this dad driving his daughter up, and it looks like driving her up to college or something. Have you seen this? Yeah.
I think I saw this, yeah.
And he, it's this big sentimental, like, all right, Levy. He's like, are you going to be okay? And she turns and she goes, Dad, it's just ISIS. Yeah. And she gets out of the car, and there's all these guys with big AK-47s and Hummers, and they're jumping in, and he's goes to some guy who looks like, kind of a leader, and goes like, hey, you take good care of her. And the guy just kind of like smiles at him, and he smiles back. And someone put like, amazing how like this is just, that was like 10 years ago. And look at Hamas now. There's like all these people being like, well, Hamas is a great organization. You're like, what? Like,
yeah. Well, and I mean, again, even think about race relations, even inside the United States, like, I mean, again, like there's some people that are like, well, we need to have areas for African Americans and people that are Latino and people that are white. And I'm like, that's Jim Crow.
Yes.
Like, that's Jim Crow.
Yes, it is.
It's like that was what the thought was. Now, yeah, it was like, we want the people that are black to have like inferior stuff. Sure. Okay. But still, the idea was that like African Americans and Caucasians can't mingle.
Yes.
Like, that was the whole point of it. Like, that was Jim Crow. Like, and it boggles my mind that we've come all the way back around to where we're going, Jim Crow had something there. That was a good idea. Like,
that's a good idea. we just need to perfect it. Okay, we just we should have just thrown it out. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah, it's a terrible
crazy.
idea.
It's crazy. Well, I know, and I don't know. It's so odd to me that people. I mean, I've seen so many videos. I mean, because YouTube's got me figured out. Like we said, we're both pretty conservative people.
Yeah.
So I get all these shorts and reels, and it's amazing the amount of videos of just a white college student talking to like some political speaker and saying, well, like so the repression of African Americans and all this, and then there'll be like an African American student will stand up and go, oh, why don't you tell me how I'm repressed? Why don't you tell me what happened to me? Yeah. And they'll go, well, I just, and then they stutter around because it's like they don't know. They're sitting there trying to make some political statement because it makes their point, but yet there's this person standing literally within a foot of them going, oh, you're saying that I'm repressed so I can't get into a college? Well, why am I here? Yeah. And then they're like, well, I mean, but on average, he's like, on average, what are you talking? Like, and it's just, I've seen so many videos like that where people, I don't know, they want, I don't know what is inspiring them to say all these things that they really don't know what they're talking about.
Yeah.
And they just want to make a statement, and they want to say, oh, look at all these victims. And it's like, well, they may not feel like a victim.
And
so why are you telling them that they should be a victim?
And
that's crazy.
And that is kind of the issue. Like, right? Like there are some statistical disadvantages that people of African American descent do have, depending on where you're born and where you live and all this, other kind of socioeconomic factors and all that kind of stuff. And certainly there are problems that need to be solved.
Mm-hmm.
But reissuing Jim Crow-like laws is not the way to do it.
Yeah.
And, dumbing down like college admission stuff in an attempt for some form of racial equity, that's not going to do it either. Like that's not right. And I think you're right on the money. Again, I mean, stuff has happened through history, and there certainly are people that are victims. But that doesn't mean everybody's a victim. And a lot of these people don't want to be considered a victim.
Yeah, they don't.
And that's, bravo to them.
Mm-hmm.
Bravo to anybody.
There's a couple really good interviews with Morgan Freeman.
Mm-hmm.
And they'll start talking like, well, how do we solve racism in America? And then Morgan Freeman just goes, stop talking about it.
Yeah.
He's like, I don't want to talk about it. I don't want you to ask me about it. And then they're so shocked because the interviewer planned for a 45-minute interview about racism.
Yeah.
And they're going, wait, you don't want to talk about it? He's like, no, I don't. I don't want to talk about it.
Yeah.
And they just, well, don't you think that it's something we should talk about? And he's like, no, because I'm not a victim. I don't need you to tell me I'm a victim. I'm not,
Yeah.
And it's just mind blowing. I mean, it's just funny to see that, but
yeah. And again, look, and this is another point, and this is a point that gets brought up sometime as well. Like, again, I brought up, like, there are some people and communities, that are by and large African American, that are to some degree put at a disadvantage. But just because I said, there's communities and a lot of them are African American, doesn't even mean that it's all African American,
mm-hmm.
right? There are some people that are Caucasian or Latinos that are put in the same exact environment.
Mm-hmm.
And so again, this is not a racial thing. And that's the thing that really bugs me, is that like everything makes it about race. It's not a race thing. And quite frankly, again, kind of going, okay, here's a topic of the day. Let's actually talk about theology. Like, from a theological side of things, we have absolutely no room for racism. Like, we just don't.
Yeah.
Like a person's a person, right? Like race really has got nothing to do with anything.
Mm-hmm.
And in fact, if we look at our history, as a Christian nation, or not a Christian nation, oh my gosh, I can't believe I just said that. As a Christian people, as a Christian group, not just Lutherans, but all Christians. If we go back in our history, guess what? Some of our big church leaders were African.
Yeah.
Not African American either. African.
Mm-hmm.
I always think it's funny. And I brought this up that one time. Yeah. We talked about Athanasius, and Athanasius was African, North African, and he had a very dark complexion.
Mm-hmm.
Very, very dark complexion. He was incredibly short. which is why you can still find translations of some other works, and they will literally call it. Now I know it's not PC, but they literally have it in there as like the black midget.
Yeah.
You know, and I guess the more what would be the proper term? You know,
Currently?
yes.
Oh, God.
I know, right? I mean, nobody knows. Again, the terms change so quick sometimes.
Here's my, I don't know, this is maybe a side tangent, I'm sorry, but here's my thing with language.
Yes.
Is that we've talked, I think I brought this up before, but language is, for all the people out there who are grammar people, and I'm sorry because you're not going to like me for this, I was never good at grammar, but also grammar is made up. It is somebody said this is the rules, and then everybody said, okay, that's how we're doing it.
You really are the devil.
I know. But it's like if someone said, hey, we're not going to put a semicolon there, it would just be like, oh, okay, you don't put a semicolon there, and that's just the rule now.
Yeah.
That was the rule. But since they established these rules, that's what it is. Now I got to remember what I was talking about because
we were talking about PC language.
Oh, PC language. So, yeah, the thing that I find interesting is that I grew up in a school that was very, very good about kids with special needs.
Yes.
Were in our classrooms a lot, and we were very involved with them, and their parents would come in and talk to us. And obviously there's words that were used back in the 90s.
Yeah.
You know, like started with an R and all that. And I won't see, now I can't even say it because that's why it is. But the thing is, then it got changed to like handicapped or mentally handicapped or special needs. And now it's like, it's not even special needs because that implies something negative, you know? So the thing is, a fourth grader can say the R word. He can say special needs. He can say gifted. He can say any of the terms you want to use for that to describe someone with that, situation. And they can say it in a tone that is horrible.
Yeah.
And mean. No matter what, you can change it to best person in the world, and they will say the phrase best person in the world in the most awful.
And again, they're using
way.
they're using that language as an insult, and it's not the words that are the problem, but it's what's standing behind the words.
Yeah.
The nuance that people are putting to it. So absolutely.
So every generation just goes, well, I grew up with people calling me this, so I don't want to be called that. You know? And then, it just over time, we got to find a new word to describe something every time because you grow up with people calling you fat. You don't want to be called fat. Then people call you obese. And then you go, well, I don't want to be called obese because that's mean. And then you say, okay, plus size. And then now, eventually someone's going to say plus size in a mean way enough times that you're going to go, okay, well, now we need a new word to describe, somebody with, who's husky or whatever the word is. It's like, there's always going to be someone who makes it an evil thing. Because it's just how they're going to be.
Yeah. And I think, and kind of going back to what I was talking about, earlier when we got on this topic, I was looking for the PC word for, I guess, little person. I don't know the if I'm offensive, I'm trying not to be, I promise. But basically, again, what I was saying is some of the translations that we see of some of the early works still have the midget word in there. And so, but that was what he was called. It was almost like a kind of a mocking thing, like they were kind of, even in the ancient world, they were kind of mocking him a little bit, but I guess he was super short and he had a very, very dark complexion, but he was North African.
Yeah.
Like truly one of the biggest of the big church fathers, who we read a lot of his writing, and we even have a creed named after him, even though he didn't write it, but it's still named after him. Yeah. And it's like, he was African.
Yeah.
Like, no, racism has no place. No place.
No.
So, there we go. As the expression goes, we're solving all the world's problems right here.
Yes, we are, yeah. Well, it's just, I don't know. It is quite a crazy time to me to see.
It really is.
See people screaming like hateful things towards, Israel and Jewish people. And just, it makes me sit there and go, I thought like we were past. I thought this was like fixed. But history always repeats itself. And if you don't study history and you don't,
you just didn't think it was going to repeat that one.
I didn't think so. I didn't think that we would have another Indiana Jones movie someday where he's beating up college protesters. They're like, we're gonna kill all the Jews, and then he's like, oh nope, and then takes out his whip and just starts going through, gotta fight all the college protesters because they're anti-Jewish, thoughts. It's just, I mean, that's what I just thought. How many movies have we seen Nazis just getting beat up, and that's and we all love it because we're like, yeah, those Nazis were evil people, and now we're hearing people who are just like, well, I mean, the Jewish people are kind of, bad. It's like, what? How can you even say that? But I don't know. I mean, it really is amazing. It's just kind of mind blowing. I can't.
It is. And again, just to kind of reiterate a point I kind of mentioned earlier, but again, I just want to stress that a lot of times what we see is the most extreme. And for what it's worth, I've seen news reports. I've read a few things. I don't know if everybody on the college campus is really thinking down with the Jews.
No, I'm sure not.
I think that is a small minority. I pray it's a small minority. I think a lot of people just want to see an end to the violence and they want to see a ceasefire. And again, I personally disagree with that. My political, kind of thoughts are that would be a wrong move. But again, that's not theology. And
yeah,
I like to keep at least as close as I can to theology on the podcast. So
now I was actually going to ask a different question, but this hasn't, I mean, just talking about this has made me think about this because, there's a lot of people who, kind of on the subject, I'll see those videos of people trying to stump like a Christian person talking on campus and be like, well, Jesus wasn't white. And it's like, well, we know that.
Yeah.
We're not blind to that. But in the text of, a lot of people were very proud of our country being like American, but what really, I mean, in the Bible, what is it? Is it a bad thing if we identify more as like an American instead of being a Christian? Or is there what does the Bible really say about that? Cause I don't personally really know for sure if it has any say about that. Or
so one of the unique elements that we have that is somewhat problematic is that as Christians, we want to be very careful how we read text. We want to make sure that we read them correctly. And yes, I know there's going to be, well, that's just, your opinion about this, that, next thing. Well, there's a yes and there's a no, right? Like there is some nuance there. There is going to be some elements that may be a little bit more in my opinion, like we don't know something. But by and large, there is a correct way to interpret Scripture and an incorrect way. And again, I understand people are going to kind of rail against that, but this is part of my career, right? Is in the technical field of this, of interpreting text, is called hermeneutics. Hermeneutics, yep. That is the technical term. It means biblical interpretation. There is kind of a process and work that you kind of do to go through it. We can kind of simplify it a little bit, but basically, whenever you're researching text, what you're ultimately trying to find is you are trying to find the quote unquote implied reader, what's known as the implied reader. The idea being okay, so and so wrote a letter. Okay, who is he writing to? And that's the question. Because the more you can discover about who he was writing to, the better you can understand that letter. Now you have to understand where he's at, where he's coming from, right? So Paul is writing to a group of Christians, and we go, okay, so where's Paul at? We kind of have a rough, rundown of his journeys of his life. And so we can say, okay, he's at this point in his life. Okay, this is the things that he knows. This is the things that he's already experienced. This is where he's at.
Right.
And then we look at where he's sending it to. We go, okay, here's the church. And then we try to gather as much information as we can about that church. Because if Paul says, down with the spiral topped building in the center of town, that doesn't make any sense to us,
right?
If we don't know anything about the spiral top building in the middle of town,
right?
We got to know what's going on with that building, Otherwise we're going to end up going, well, if there's a spiral top building, I guess we just got to destroy it. And that's not what Paul was saying, and again, Paul didn't say that at all. So, I mean, go figure, but in order to, but we gotta understand kind of both sides of the story. And then once we understand the implied reader and the history and all this kind of stuff, now we can start kind of layering it down and kind of getting through the context. And then, get this, then after that, we got to also read the text, but we got to read it even in the original language, and we got to take care to notice grammar.
Oh, no, not grammar.
I know, grammar.
Grammar's made up, man. And I can say that because the guy who invented the language for Halo, the series, has told me that.
Grammar's a real thing. It's been around a long time.
All right, agree to disagree on that one. You can't change every one of my views, Chris.
But yeah, you got to pay attention to the grammar of the text. What's actually being, you got so much work to do with all of this.
Yeah.
And once you start getting down to kind of the bottom and you start feeling it out, all of a sudden you realize text actually have at times very, very specific meanings. So, again, the one text that always gets misused a lot is the Philippians passage, I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. And, and Paul is writing to a group of Christians in kind of a small church in Philippi, and he's in prison.
Yeah.
He is he is not talking about leaping over buildings. If you look at the context of the passage, he's talking about how he endures. Mm-hmm. And he's actually very thankful for some of the things that the Philippians have given to him. And so he's talking about how he can endure.
Yeah.
And so that's the whole element of that passage. He's talking to a group of Christians that really their heart is pouring out for him. And he's saying, look, I got this. I can endure all things.
Yeah.
I got this. I'm in prison. It's terrible, but I can endure this. And so once you understand both the implied reader and Paul and where he is in his journey and all these other things, all of a sudden you're like, oh, okay, that makes some kind of sense. Now I can apply that. Now here's where that becomes very important. Throughout the Old Testament, God commands the Israelites to go to the Promised Land. And he commands them on how they're to set up their nation and how they're going to... And so we end up with a lot of verses that actually talk about how, if they as a people and as a nation follow the commands of God, God will bless the nation. Mm-hmm. And so if they don't follow the commands, God will not bless the nation. But here's the thing, and this is really important, and this ruffles a lot of feathers. God is not making a blanket statement. He is not making a blanket statement that says, hey, if your nation follows me, everything's going to go great. And if you don't follow me, everything's going to go bad. He's not saying that. Mm. He's talking to the Israelites, the ancient Israelites that are going to the Promised Land. We were not promised a Promised Land. We were not given a Promised Land. In fact, if we really look at the biblical and full context, we would say the Promised Land is the new heavens and the new earth that we will receive once our Lord returns.
Right.
So that's what we look forward to. That is our Promised Land.
Right.
The Promised Land of the Israelites, a lot of times you can look up Old Testament theology. It's called land theology. Mm-hmm. A lot of that is completely different.
Yeah.
And so it's one of those things where it's by and large, if a nation adheres to Christian thought patterns and thought processes and laws, it does have a tendency to do better. However, think about the laws that we're talking about. Most of them are laws that, a good nation would do.
Right.
Right? Don't murder people. Don't steal stuff.
Yeah.
I mean, if we really want to be serious about it, don't gossip. Don't be, bringing a bunch of false testimony and lying about your neighbor, are gathering into certain, I mean, again, these are all principles that, if a nation adhered to those, that nation would be pretty good. Yeah. I mean, imagine if a nation just allowed murder and theft and was okay.
Yeah.
So by and large, yes, people that tend to adhere to these rules, the nation does tend to do a little bit better, or maybe even a lot better. But at the same time, it's like, we just have to realize, like, what if we adhere to all those principles and a military faction comes in and destroys us? Well, that sucks.
Yeah.
But God did not promise us that everything was going to go peachy and great.
Yeah.
He just didn't. That promise was for the ancient Israelites. It wasn't for you. Mm-hmm. And again, I'm not saying that we can't look at those passages, because again, God did promise us land, but it's a new heavens and a new earth. It is something that we veer off into the future. In the meantime, this promised land was all leading to Jesus.
Yeah.
It was all leading to Jesus.
Yeah, it is interesting, because there's a lot of, people get them wrong a lot. Can I ask you about a specific text? See, and if you don't know, we can skip it.
Well, yeah, we'll see. It depends on if I know it or not right offhand.
I'm trying to remember what, you might, I don't even know the exact wording, but something along the lines of, don't look down on someone because they're young. Am I sparking anything or no?
Yeah, you're sparking a little bit, but I'd still need more context. But again, I keep going with the question.
It's basically just, so a lot of youth group rooms love to put this on their wall.
Okay, sure.
Because it's basically saying something along the lines of, don't look down on young people because they're young, or that an idea of theirs is wrong just because they're young, or something like that. Mm-hmm. I can't remember.
So again, and I don't know the specific verse. And you're looking it up as best as you can, but I will kind of do some off the cuff comments here. One of the things that I would say is that you found it?
I found it. Yeah.
Okay.
Sorry. First Timothy, right?
Yeah.
Or 1 Timothy, First Timothy,
First
4:12 through 13. And it's, don't let anyone look down on you because you are young, but set an example for the believers in speech, in conduct, in love, in faith, and in purity. Until I come, devote yourself to the public reading of Scripture, to preaching, and to teaching. I don't know if that second part is one that I ever really read before, because I just remember looking at that and it was, don't let anyone look down on you because you are young, but set an example for the believers in speech, in mm-hmm. conduct, in love, in faith, and purity. So I didn't know if you had any, because the thing is, I see that a lot, but then I don't know, I wonder what the context of it is, because I see that on youth room walls all the time. And then at the same time, it's like a church puts that up, and there's a lot of churches that the first thing they'll say is like, well, you're young, you don't understand how things work.
So Timothy was kind of like a pastor. And so okay. he was and Paul was guiding him in that respect. And so that's some of the commands that Paul is giving him, is like, hey, there are going to be other people that look down on you because they think that you're young or too young. And the reality is, I don't know how old Timothy was.
Yeah.
And I don't think the text ever tells us. But I will say though that, especially in a Jewish world, in the ancient Jewish world, you weren't even considered to be mature until 30.
Right.
In fact, you weren't even allowed to read certain parts of the Bible until you were 30.
Oh, wow.
In fact, there's 2 books in particular, Ezekiel 1, and then Song of Solomon was the other one. You weren't allowed to read those until you were 30 years old. So up until you were 30 years old, it was like, well, you just don't know. You haven't even read the whole Bible. You haven't even read it all. Imagine that being a slander today. I just think about that. Could you imagine? I'm just trying to think about that. I'm trying to imagine what it would be like to go down the hallways of a school and be like, well, you're just an idiot. You haven't even read the book of Revelation yet. Gosh. Come back when you've read the whole thing, you're a dunce, that wouldn't even be a slam nowadays. But again, that was kind of the ancient world.
Yeah.
Once you hit 30, you could read those books. You were considered more mature, able to handle some of these things. And so, but until then, you were really seen as immature and kind of to some degree uneducated. But that being said, again, we don't know. Maybe Timothy just turned 30. You know, I mean, I don't know.
Yeah.
But again, the point being is Paul there is kind of saying like, hey, you know, don't be bullied just because you happen to be on the young end.
Yeah.
You know, you're going to have some elders. They're going to try to push you around a little bit. You know, that tends to be where he's going. Paul is going with that. And the way, and again, to kind of put it a different way, guys, like people thought very differently about youth back then than they do today. You know, even when you talk about like, you know, the disciples not allowing kids to come to Jesus, and everybody goes, "Oh, sweet little kids," and it's like, it's like, yeah, okay, yeah, sweet little kids, but that's our view today. Mm-hmm. In the ancient world, they were stupid, and yes, I mean that because that is exactly how they looked. Kids were stupid, unproductive, not useful to society. They were leeches that had to leech onto everything. You know, you fed a kid, but he never produced anything. You know, I mean, and again, this was the view that they had for children.
Yeah.
Children were stupid little leeches, and they just weren't worth anything. I mean, you know.
Yeah.
And again,
interesting.
I realize like that is completely different.
Yeah.
You know, completely different than our view. But realize part of the reason that we view things the way we view things is because of Jesus.
Yeah, right.
That is to say, Jesus, you know, they wanted to reject the kids, and Jesus was the one that said, no, let the little kids come to me.
Yeah.
Like, let them come. Like, you know, let me bless them. Let me, it's just like, let them be here. They're allowed to be here.
Yeah, right.
You know, they're important too. And that changed everything. And again, I always say, like, look, I mean, you know, one of the things that I think a lot of Christians would do well to understand too is like, you know, we talk about, boy, we're just hitting all the buzzworthy topics.
Yeah.
But, you know, going into the topic of abortion, right? Mm-hmm. Because we don't want to have any topic left out.
Right.
But you know, in the ancient world, one of the big things that Christians did is, again, in the ancient world, if they had a kid that they felt was an inconvenience, they just threw it away. Because again, kids were stupid leeches. So if I don't want the kid, I'll just go to the trash heap and just chuck them.
Right.
And I mean, again, I realize that for a lot of you guys are going, oh my gosh. But like, yeah, that's what they did.
Yeah.
And so one of the things that the ancient Christians used to do is they used to crawl through trash to get kids.
Oh, man.
To help raise them.
Sheesh.
And so, you know, kids were like valued. They were seen as important and special and something that Jesus himself said, let the little children come to him, and he blessed them. And so the ancient Christians would like crawl through garbage to get these kids that were being tossed away, literally just tossed away. Gosh. It's insane to me.
Yeah.
And you know, where that has to do with things like Planned Parenthood is, first of all, you know, our stance of being anti-abortion and pro-life, it dates back a little ways. We've always been pro-life, always. But on the other hand, I would also say that, you know, it's also important, you know, sometimes Christians kind of get lambasted for being pro-life, but yet not trying to take care of the kids. And some of that is really unfounded because we have a lot of care facilities and we support a lot of care facilities. Mm-hmm. And a lot of them are actually getting their hands tied because of some of this new stuff coming around, you know, which is real sad, but we'll save that for a different day. But I would say though, that is the other important part, right? It's not just saying that we want, you know, the parents to have the children, but also saying, okay, parents, you know, you had the child, we got you, you know, kind of thing.
Yeah.
We're here to support all children. Mm-hmm. And I do think that that's like an important aspect that we sometimes miss. You know, the ancient Christians, they would stop the child from being killed, but a lot of times they did it at their own expense. They'd raise these kids in their homes.
Yeah, right.
You know? So anyway.
Interesting.
Yeah.
That's mind-blowing how things have gone back so far in history.
Yeah. But again, kind of to the point, like what you were saying, like, you know, realize like there's a whole different world. Mm-hmm. And the world is the world the way it is because it was changed by Jesus. Like we are still, the way we look at kids is still an impact of the Christians that are going off of Jesus' words.
Yeah.
So, Yeah.
So are we okay to be proud as like a nation, or do we need to be more focused on our faith? Would you say or is that too heavy of a?
Well, I'm kind of trying to dissect that. I mean,
Yeah.
like I think it's okay. I mean, look, you can be proud as a nation. You can say, look, I think I have a great country.
Yeah.
You know, again, I think America is truly. I really think that America, even with all of its flaws and bumps and bruises, I truly do still believe that America is probably the greatest country in the world. I really do. I believe that, and so I am, proud of my country. But that being said, I think it's very important to be a faithful Christian. Now, I think that as a Christian, it is my duty to vote, because that's part of me being a citizen.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's important to vote. And I also think it's important for me to vote my morals and my convictions. Not just what I believe economically, but actually what I believe morally and spiritually. Mm-hmm. So even though, and this is where, you get into like touchy, with a lot of things, is like, if I agree with somebody economically, but disagree with him morally, and I believe he's going to potentially pass laws according to those morals, then I need to be really, really careful before I vote for him, if I vote for him.
Right.
Now, on the other hand, if like and this is where we run across a lot of people too, because like look, we got a presidential candidate, presidential stuff coming up.
Yep.
Both candidates claim to be Christians. Both of them, honestly, and I'm just going to be blunt about this, both of them do not strike me as good Christians.
Yeah.
Neither one. And so I have to look at which one do I think personally is going to vote closer to my Christian morals.
Yeah.
Now, economics plays a role too. I believe one economic policy is superior to another. But that's my political leanings. That's this leaning. That's that leaning. But the reality is I still have to think about what is the moral component here, mm-hmm. and which one do I think is going to vote. Which one do I think is going to establish and lead a country that is closer in line to my own morality?
Right.
I'm not looking, and again, I mean, we should be able to look at them as a character. Unfortunately, I don't think we can look at either one of these guys as in terms of their character. Both of them are corrupt and awful. Like, yeah. I'm sorry, they just are.
Yeah, which, I mean, is one reason why it's like, I mean, as Christians, we should know that God really is Jesus was really the only purest, person who walked the earth. So you really can't expect these people to be perfect. Not that means it's okay, but it's just, we live in a world where people aren't perfect. And
again, I think we would actually have a little bit of a difference if we had like two clean cut guys up there,
right? Yeah,
or gals that were like went to church every Sunday and typically tended to live out their morals.
Yes,
that would be a whole new ball game.
Yeah,
but we don't have that.
No,
we don't have that at all. A lot of people on the left will point out the flaws of Trump and point out all of his, various marriages and affairs and this, that, and next thing. And like, they're absolutely correct.
Yes. Yeah.
He is an atrocious, I don't know, maybe he repented yesterday. But he was an absolutely atrocious person, like from a moralistic standpoint. But on the same thing, like, people will point out Biden and like, oh my gosh, he has a lot of history. And some of it was his blatant racism back in the day.
Yeah.
He obviously has some corruption issues. Now, how deep they go, I'm not even going to speculate at this point, but he has some obvious corruption issues, and is willing to sell out for the biggest spender on some things.
Yeah.
And, whenever they release a report that says, yeah, he's obviously corrupt, but we're not going to charge him because he's too old and senile, like that, again, he's obviously done some horrible things.
Yeah.
And so again, we're left with like, it seems to me that Trump is a little bit more blatant with it and Biden is a little bit more secretive. But at the same time, they're both corrupt. They've both done awful things. And so if we're going for our moral gauge, to be honest, I think we're stuck. We're just going, I don't know.
Yeah, right.
I don't know which one. Like, but we don't, that's the point though. We don't have like a polished guy who's like, you can't dig up any dirt on him.
Right.
And like he goes to church all the time or she goes to church. You just don't have that.
Right. Yeah, it's unfortunate, but we're not, humans are not perfect. And obviously that's why we have to try to, follow our faith, which is to try to be as perfect as we can.
Yeah.
But
yeah.
All right. Well, I think it's probably time that we move on to our last segment.
Oh man, is it that much time has passed?
Yeah, we're getting up there.
Whew, I guess it has.
Yeah,
man alive.
All right, ready for church chatter?
Church chatter. Yeah, here we are. Here we are, everybody. We have the big thing, of course, is confirmation. Confirmation.
Yes.
Sunday. So we have 5 confirmands. So we look forward to that. It's a great time of year. Questioning is this Friday. Mm-hmm. I already know the kids are very nervous.
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah. They always get nervous for questioning. It's great. It is absolutely great. I was at school today, and the principal was asking some of the confirmands like the trivia question, which is like about the commandments. And I was like, one of them said they couldn't do it, and I was like, oh no! But like it's good fun. They get so nervous. They get so much energy tied up into it. But it's a good time. It's a great time. So we're going to do that on Friday, and then we're going to have confirmation, and then on Mother's Day is when we're doing First Communion.
Nice.
And so that will also be good. So yeah, we got to and look, and then after that on the 19th, we have our Stepping Forward in Faith, which is a blanket ceremony.
Yes. And
we give the blankets to the graduating youth, the seniors that are graduating.
Mm-hmm.
And this is an interesting thought. Again, somebody mentioned this the other day, and I couldn't believe it. But do you know who the seniors are this year?
The seniors?
Yeah.
By name or you?
No.
No.
The seniors this year have never had a graduation.
Oh, right, because of COVID. And everything. Yeah.
This is the class of 2020. They graduated their 8th grade.
Yeah.
So,
well, what's kind of crazy is when I started at St. John's, that was right in 2020.
Yep.
I was doing the maternity leave at the high school. And so there were a few people that were in band and stuff. And so as I started working at St. John's, I started hearing, oh, this week we just want to wish Autumn Evans a happy birthday. And then I'd go to school the next day and go, Autumn, you go to St. John's. And I'd be like, why aren't you playing? So it was kind of cool. But then to know that she's graduating, it was like, whoa, where did the time go? I mean, because that's when I just started. So I keep thinking of her as like a freshman. And, now it's like, oh my gosh, she's graduating. High school.
Yeah.
So, and there's other people who also, that were in there that have graduated since and stuff. That's just crazy.
And all that stuff, honestly, all that stuff really does, that always blows my mind.
Yeah.
Like one of the, I always say, when I first started ministry, there was a kid, and he was a freshman in high school. Mm-hmm. He was little, freshman as freshman could be. He is maybe my height. So I'm 5'8", so he's about 5'8", coming in there kind of real scrawny and all that kind of stuff. And then like he grew up and he's 6'8".
Oh my gosh.
He was like a wall. Like he was so big. Yeah. And then, and now he's graduated college, he's gone to law school, graduated law school. And now he's in a firm with his dad. I see like little things on like Facebook every now and again. I'm just like, and he's got like a kid now and stuff. And I'm just going, oh my gosh, what happened? Yeah. Like he was a freshman. He's a little kid,
I know that is crazy.
I was as tall as him,
I know, it's crazy. I mean, I have a few things like that because I started teaching drum lessons when I was in high school.
Yeah.
So 2 summers ago, I think I went to one of those, my first students, I went to his wedding, and then, we got their like baby announcement, and it's like, oh my gosh, this is so weird.
Yeah.
But it's cool. It's so cool to see where people go though. That's so awesome to see,
it's going to be interesting. I feel like I'm going to have to pull out the confirmation picture for this group. in 2020. Because I remember we had them like all separated in the pews because they had to be 6 feet apart.
Oh, right, yeah.
You know, and so it was like, yeah, it's like, yeah, it's gonna be it's interesting. But yeah, this is the group that's stepping forward in faith now, and so we'll get the blanket ceremony coming up. So I mean, it's just like
very nice blankets, by the way.
Yes, they are.
They
always.
look so
they always
comfy.
Are.
They really look good.
Yeah, they always are, and it's like, and then after that, you know, of course, we get a couple weeks, and then we have VBS that starts on June 9th.
Oh wow, quick!
Yeah, we always do it pretty early, and so it's coming up pretty quick. And I believe Pastor Kevin Biltman will be around actually to help us start, and he is going to be preaching for us that Sunday as well.
Nice.
So we got a lot. I mean, we really do. We have tons of stuff to look forward to. I don't want to get too far ahead of myself, but I mean, again, we have a lot to look forward to. It's really awesome. It's a great time of year, but I'll also be honest, I'm exhausted and I'm ready for summer to hit.
Yeah,
I really am. So, yeah.
It's exciting.
So that's all we got going on there. And I say, oh, that's all we got. We got stuff going on for like a month and a half.
That's right.
Anyway,
there's plenty of stuff.
There's a lot of stuff going on. But anyway, so it's good. It's good stuff. But anyway, so that's kind of what's going on around church. Mm-hmm. That's church chatter for you.
That's church chatter for
you. That's right. That's right. So anyway, but anyway, that's all I really have.
Yeah.
So yeah,
exciting.
We try our best.
Yeah.
Well, all right. I think that's all that we actually have time for tonight. Mm-hmm. So God's blessings to all of you. Thanks for tuning in, and good night, or good day, or goodbye.
Bye.